Are the New York Mets done making moves this offseason? And if so, did they do enough to put their team over the top heading into 2023? We're going to discuss all of that and give the offseason a grade on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment matter more by visiting FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Now, the New York Mets have made some sweeping changes this offseason. They have kept their lineup basically the same with some tweaks, but they've overhauled their rotation and their bullpen, so the pitching staff is much improved. Now we sit here 3 weeks away from pitchers and catchers reporting, and we have to wonder, is this team done adding? Well, I think that the fan base would probably say, no, they got to add more. They got to get some improvements to their lineup. But if we look at where they're at after the Tommy Pham signing, I just don't see any additions being made. Because you look at the outfield, Mark Canha, Brandon Nimmo, Starling Marte, now Tommy Pham. So you got 4 outfielders. Starting lineup when it comes to the infield, Eduardo Escobar, Francisco Lindor, Jeff McNeil, Pete Alonso, same group from last year. You also know McNeil could shift into the outfield in a pinch, and to back him up, you have, in my opinion, maybe the best backup second baseman, defensive utility guy in baseball, Louis Guillorme, so he is set with a roster spot. That's 5 in the infield. Now, you got Daniel Vogelbach serving as your primary DH against right-handed pitching. You have Omar Narvaez now replacing James McCann, joining Tomas Nido as the backstop. That's 3 more locked-in roster spots. So 4 in the outfield, 5 in the infield. Those 3 bring you to 12. 12 out of 13 position players you are going to carry. Theoretically, yes, there's another spot that has to be claimed. But you have Darren Ruff still. Not sure if he'll be on the roster come opening day or if he'll be traded. But I think at this point, he's worth bringing to camp at $3 million and just seeing what you got. And if anything else, get some good at-bats that other teams can see out there, or maybe you then could facilitate a trade. If not, you just decide, hey, he's going to be on our team. You got Mark Vientos and Brett Beatty, who both, I think, have a decent shot to break camp with a good spring. You got Khalil Lee that's still kind of in that boat as well, assuming he's not a 40-man roster casualty at some point. And you got Francisco Alvarez as the absolute outside shot, but I did a full podcast on him on Friday where, let's be honest, it doesn't seem like he's heading towards breaking camp come opening day. But you also have Tim LeCastro that they signed to a minor league deal that could serve as that Terrence Gore pinch runner type guy who could be a utility, man for them. You got Abraham Almonte and Jose Peraza who are also signed to minor league deals. So that competition for one spot on the roster, I think that is how they're going to complete their position player core. Now, when it comes to the rotation, we're going to discuss that next segment because I think that's where they improved the most, and we'll get into the names, but we all know them well at this stage. The bullpen, I guess, is the last place where they might add, but you got Edwin Diaz locked in, Adam Ottavino, David Robertson, Brooks Raley, Drew Smith, so that's a group of 5 that you know will be there. Zach Green was picked up in the Rule 5 draft, so until they cut him, you must assume that he will be on the MLB roster to retain him. So that's 6 arms in your bullpen. You would think that David Peterson will factor in as that 6th starter, either replacing one of the 5 injured guys or being that swing man. And if it's not him as the swing man, you got Trevor Williams. They're replacing Trevor Williams. You got Tyler McGill or Joey Lucchesi as other options. Also, Eleazar Hernandez. So if you think there's going to be one long man in the bullpen, long man, swing man, that's 7 spots out of an 8-man pen. You still have Jeff Brigham, who I think actually brings a lot to the table for the Mets. Pun not intended there. You got John Curtis. You got Bryce Montes de Oca, you got Steven Nogasek, you got Steven Ridings, and you got Taylor Cicito, all on the 40-man roster. So any of those guys could make it. Tommy Hunter, notable minor league signing, could make it. They have a lot of competition that can fill that last spot, or really, if you throw Zach Green into the mix, the last 2 spots of that bullpen. Now, there's been some rumor interest in Zach Britton and Andrew Chafin. Those guys are still out there. Maybe the Mets bring one of them in if they want to form this super bullpen and they want to add maybe a more bona fide second lefty to join Brooks Raley. But one reliever is not going to drastically change how we feel about the New York Mets. Maybe they add one, but it's not going to really affect the grade we would give them or just our overall feel of what this team did this offseason to improve or at least remain the same as they were this past season where they won 101 games. But did they do enough to make sure that they can not only compete with the Braves and the Phillies, but come out as the best team? We're going to discuss that next. Before we do, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here, and we are really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they are the #1 sports book in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better because they have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers can join today and get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel has all your favorite bets from the money line to the point spread to player props. Plus, you can even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with their same game parlays, all on the app, which is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So football fans, don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, by going to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment matter more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I think when we look back at the Mets offseason, the biggest area of improvement and the biggest area that's going to impact this team in 2023 is the changes they made in their starting rotation. They were set to lose Taijuan Walker, Chris Bassett, and Jacob deGrom, maybe even Carlos Carrasco if they didn't pick up the option. They did, so they keep Carrasco, and you return from last year's rotation, Scherzer, Carrasco, David Peterson, and that's really it. Tyler McGill also made some starts. You're looking at 23 from Scherzer in 2022, 29 from Carrasco, 19 from Peterson. Now, there could be some internal improvement there if you just get a healthy Max Scherzer for the full year, and he has been a guy in the past that has been able to take the ball 30 times. If you get, 50 starts from Carrasco and Peterson this year, you feel pretty good about that. Now, what you're really looking at when it comes to the improvements is you are looking at Chris Bassett, Taijuan Walker, and Jacob deGrom, where you got a combined 70 starts, 30 from Bassett, 29 from Taijuan, 11 from deGrom, and you are wondering if you can get better from Justin Verlander, Kodai Senga, and Jose Quintana. Now, the other 12 starts last year, if you're curious, were made by Trevor Williams, who made 9, 1 apiece from Jose Butto, Thomas Zabucky, and Michael Givens as an opener. But again, it's that 70 starts, right, that you had from Bassett, from deGrom, and of course from Taijuan Walker. Now, look at the improvements or additions that they made. I think Jose Quintana is your Taijuan Walker replacement, and last year he pitched to a 2.93 ERA, where Walker pitched to a 3.49 ERA. Now, we look at expected performance, the expected ERA of these guys, they're about the same. For Quintana this year was 3.86, for Taijuan it was 3.94. You can say that Taijuan is a younger pitcher that's on a little bit more of an upward trajectory where now he's a couple years removed from TJ, and maybe there's a little more upside at play than Quintana, who might have just been a one-year revelation coming off a lot of down years. And, how is he going to really replicate that this upcoming season? But I really don't think that there's a drastic difference between these two guys in anything other than their contracts. Taijuan, 4 years, $72 million, $18 million a season. For Quintana, 2 years, $26 million, way less risk in that contract, a short-term deal, and that's essentially a high-end 4, a low-end 5. Like that's kind of the ceiling floor that we're talking about here for this type of a pitcher. And so I love the Quintana addition. I don't think it drastically changes this team at all. Now, really, the question is, you go from Bassett deGrom to, Senga and Verlander. And I think it's an interesting conversation to be had here. Now, we start with the Bassett Senga piece of this. I think that's the one place where you can make an argument this team got worse, because Chris Bassett across 30 starts was really good, and he's a very established starter that you can bank on in a 162 game season. I think that down the stretch, we saw Bassett come up short in his last couple starts, which really reflected the way the Mets felt about him, especially at what he ended up getting, $21 million per season. But it's going to be a tall task for Senga to be as productive as Bassett was as that real anchor of last year's rotation. With that said, the upside is better with Kodai Senga, and when you kind of raise your floor by getting Verlander instead of DeGrom, it allows you to gamble a little bit more on the Senga piece. If this was a rotation that returned Jacob DeGrom and got Kodai Senga, I'd feel a lot worse about it, because I don't know for sure if DeGrom's going to give me 25 plus starts. With Verlander, I feel pretty confident in that. And so I say, you know what? I'll take a chance on this starter that could strike out the world potentially this season with his ghost fork and a fastball that can live at 96, can touch 102. Maybe you can unlock an incredible pitcher in Kodai Senga, and if you get a healthy Verlander and Scherzer, that could be the best 1-2-3 punch in baseball, a 1-2-3 punch that, if healthy come October, could carry you to a World Series. So I think that the combination of moves, I feel better about the floor of this team, because I think that Justin Verlander with Scherzer should really be that real anchor that you can just count on, that the two of them are going to get you through the regular season. I think Senga is the real wild card here. Overall, losing Jacob DeGrom hurts, but they did such a good job replacing him that I think this rotation is at least the same. I actually think it's a tick or two better. So I like what they did there. And then you look at the other improvements made here, and the bullpen is where you see them. Edwin Diaz comes back. That was a massive question mark. Doesn't necessarily improve your team, but you needed him back. Adam Ottavino is back. Again, based on what you had last year, to get your best two relievers back, that's huge. Drew Smith obviously returns as well. And then you replace from the roster opening day last year, Joely Rodriguez and Trevor May, with David Robertson and Brooks Raley. David Robertson was a massive addition for this team. Really steady. Gives you another guy with a ton of closer experience. So even though I think Adam Ottavino is the second best reliever in this bullpen, I think David Robertson is the guy that will be tasked with getting the saves when Edwin Diaz maybe needs a blow, because he has that experience locking down games. Brooks Raley, a guy that really has incredible, peripheral, all of his metrics, the shape of his pitches. He's a guy that could be dynamic as a lefty reliever. I think that's a big upgrade over Joely. So I think the bullpen has improved, and they've added a ton of depth in that department as well. Lastly, you look at the lineup, and bare minimum, you say it's the same thing, but that could have been a lot worse, because you might have lost Nimmo. Now you didn't. And that's a massive addition by a lack of subtraction, right? If you lose him and you try to replace him, this lineup takes a step back, and you get concerned about the lineup because you thought that they were going to have Correa. Let's remember how good the Mets were offensively last year. I think that at times the slumps, the down periods get overblown, and you really forget really how steady and overall great they were. They're the second best on-base percentage in baseball as a team at .332, a point behind the Dodgers. The league average on-base percentage for teams was .312, so 20% better than league average at getting on base. That is a prerequisite to scoring runs. When it comes to scoring runs, they scored 772 last year. That was fifth best in baseball, tied with the Cardinals. 4.77 runs per game. League average was 4.28. OPS last year was 744 for the Mets. That was seventh best. League average was 706. And then you look at weighted runs created plus, which measures hitters and teams based on an average of 100. At 116, their team WRC plus was 16% better than league average. They were third best behind only the Dodgers and the Blue Jays. So you could say the offense is a push at this point, but I could even make an argument it's slightly better with Narvaez replacing McCann, and with Pham potentially replacing kind of a carousel of other guys. But we're going to get to more of that in just a minute. Overall, though, has this team improved enough? I think their rotation's better, their bullpen's better, their offense is in a push, and it was a 101-win team last year. How much better did you need to get? I don't think they had to do much. They just had to get themselves back to where they were, and the work that it took to get there was a lot, and that's why I'm going to grade their offseason very well. We'll get into that in just a minute, though. First, another word from our sponsors. So you look at the Mets offseason as a whole here, and I think the Carlos Correa thing is really kind of weighing down the way people are perceiving the Mets offseason, because the task that Billy Epler and company had going into this offseason was massive. You could have lost Nimmo. You had Edwin Diaz and Jacob deGrom as free agents as well. You only were returning Drew Smith to your bullpen at the beginning of the offseason, and your rotation was just Max Scherzer, really, and David Peterson. They had to make a decision on Carrasco. They kept him. They added a bunch of starters to overhaul things to make up for the loss of also Bassett and Walker along with deGrom, and they rebuilt a bullpen from scratch, which is not easy to do. And then again, you're looking at Brandon Nimmo, and that's an addition, or again, an addition by not subtracting here. That was massive because he graded out based on FanGraphs wins above replacement as the best center fielder in baseball last year, outside of Aaron Judge, who played a lot of center, but you would expect him, now that they got Harrison Bader, to be a right fielder again. Like, there is a fringy argument to be made that Nimmo's the best center fielder in baseball. Now, I look at Julio Rodriguez, look at Michael Harris. There's other guys that I like more than Nimmo going into next season, but not many. I mean, a top 5 center fielder is, I think, pretty comfortable to say about Nimmo, and top 10 is a definite. So to lose him would have been devastating. You keep him, you keep Diaz, you rebuild the rotation, you build a bullpen around him. Like, this offseason was just trending so well, and then you have this almost Wilpon-esque, I don't want to put that on Steve Cohen, but you put this kind of a black cloud of a story that ended up transpiring on Correa, where it was 3 weeks of what's going to happen. Will they, won't they, will they, won't they, will they, won't they, and then they won't. So you had like a letdown of what you thought was going to be a slam dunk, no doubt about it, A+ of an offseason, the clear-cut 100% favorite to not only win the division, potentially win the World Series. That's what the Correa addition would have meant to the Mets, and so there is just that natural, letdown of, okay, well, how much better are they? But when we really look at the full picture, the Mets have, if nothing else, gotten back to a similar level as a team that won 101 games, and I really think they're better. I think when you look at the rotation of the bullpen, it's clear there's upgrades in the lineup, even though you can say, well, all they did was return Nimmo, and they take a flyer on Tommy Pham, and they bring in Omar Narvaez. Well, I look at Omar Narvaez, and I say, I like him a lot better than James McCann going into next season. I do. Now, you look at Tommy Pham, and while I don't love that addition, and that's where I am going to knock this grade a little bit, I still think that you're looking at a guy that still grades out above average in sprint speed and arm strength, and also still hits the ball harder than most of the league. Is in the top 11% there, and you think maybe an athlete like that, even at his age, can be in a refined role just facing left-handed pitching and find some success. So I'm okay with it. And I don't love the move. I think better moves could have been made if the Mets weren't distracted on Correa, and maybe they could have pulled in a Conforto, or they could have got Brandon Drury. They could have got a piece that made a little more sense, or look a little bit of a better player. Maybe they could have had more time to work on an A.J. Pollock or to work on an Adam Duvall, that they weren't able to get those type of deals done. Ultimately, though, I don't think it's enough to drastically knock them or to think that their offseason was some failure. It just, to me, takes them from what I think was trending towards an A, and I knock it down to an A-. That's where I give the Mets a grade for this offseason, an A-. I think they did a lot of great work. They improved. Could they have improved a little bit more? Is there moves that they could have made that would have been better, I think, than some of the additions? Certainly, and I'm looking mostly at the catcher position. Like, I like the platoon of Narvaez and Nido defensively. I'm not sure if Narvaez is going to provide too much offensively. I think it's better than McCann, but that's not saying much. And they're investing a lot of money in that catcher position where you're still hoping that Alvarez takes over. But even with that, even with my lack of confidence in Tommy Pham, I almost give it a coin flip on it working out. I still think that this team is in great shape. to be a dominant force next season. The pitching is clearly better, and their lineup is the same with the chance of improvements. For one, having a full year of Daniel Vogelback, and two, having prospects in Brett Beatty, Mark Vientos, Francisco Alvarez, even the outside chance of a Ronnie Mauricio that could take off at any instant and give you maybe that X factor bat that you think the Mets might be a little bit short on. So that's where I'm at for the Mets offseason. I give it an A-. I think outside of adding an Andrew Chafin or a Zach Britton, they're basically done here. And we're 3 weeks away from opening day to really figure out what this team is going to be capable of in 2023. But that's going to be all for the show today. I will announce, though, that this is Shohei Ohtani week. On tomorrow's show, we're going to kick off our Ohtani 2024 offseason coverage because that will be one of the biggest stories in all of baseball and all of sports, and the Mets will certainly be in the mix. So make sure you tune into that. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on Twitter, @Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Prospects, hosted by Lindsey Crosby. This is where you should go to learn about the stars of tomorrow. You can follow Locked On MLB Prospects on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts.